Hi YouTubers, this is Crud Big Rig here again with another very interesting rifle. I'd like to give you the M-14. It is one of the only wooden rifles that I own, one of 4 I do believe. It's heavy, it's accurate, and there's never been really a good YouTube review about this weapon system. They've kind of touched on it with the SOCOM rifle, the 16-inch variant, but no one's really ever reviewed a full 22-inch, pretty much USGI M14. Maybe it's because of money issues, maybe it's because it's just a big gun, but I know a lot of people that absolutely love this weapon system. I'm going to go through a little bit of the history of the rifle and my personal opinions about it. If you notice, I've refinished the stock a little bit. It had a very, very nice tiger stripe to it, and I, over the winter time, had put a little bit more of a high gloss finish on it since this is a competition rifle for me. This is a Springfield Armory M1A loaded model, which means that it has the 4.5 two-stage trigger, as well as a medium weight barrel. Which gives it a little bit better accuracy, as well as it has the national match sights, non-hooded. It's a very, very good precision rifle for iron sights. You won't get nearly as accurate as a scoped rifle, but for iron sights this is probably about the best you can get. I'm going to go over a few talking points about the history of this rifle. John C. Garand originally designed the M1 Garand variant that had a detachable box magazine and a smaller intermediate cartridge. The U.S. military decided in its infinite wisdom to not use a quote-unquote easily damaged and lost detachable magazine. Personally, as the BAR has shown, that's really false. There were two fears from the military brass. First being that the soldiers couldn't conserve ammunition, which obviously changed during Vietnam, and the second being that they would lose their magazines. This time and time again has been a falsity that's really just a perpetuated myth. In 1945, John C. Garand started the development of the M14 weapon system. 1957 was the initial adoption. Went up against the venerable FAL design and narrowly lost the contract. The FAL did just fine, but my honest opinion was that the military already had the machining for the M1 Garand receiver, and since that was already in place, I think that played quite a bit of a big role. In between 1958 and 1963, the U.S. government ordered over 1.3 million rifles from the 4 manufacturers: Springfield Armory, Winchester, Harrington and Richardson, H&R for short, and Thompson Ramo Woolridge Incorporated, or TRW. I'm sure I butchered that name, but oh well. Due to the massive production issues in 1962, the Secretary of State wished to cancel the M-14 project. It took over a decade to finally get this rifle running smoothly. However, the Army ordered a whopping 2.5 million rifles for the procurement by 1969. The government spent a total of $10 million in research and development of this rifle. The weapon was only in service for 7 years officially. If you can notice, the receiver on this rifle is very intricate. There's a lot of angles to it. This weapon system was designed to combine 4 weapons into one. It would replace the BAR, the M1 carbine, M1 Garand, and Thompson submachine gun. The M14 military issue rifle was a fully automatic select fire rifle. These rifles were designed to fire full auto as a BAR roll, which they would have roughly 2 in each squad, just like a BAR operator. The rest would shoot precisely as a main battle rifle. It has a 500-yard maximum effective range, but I do believe the Marine Corps trained out to 600. And this rifle with a scope is easily attainable to an 800-yard accuracy. This gave U.S. soldiers an additional 200 yards to hit AK-wielding Soviet soldiers in the fictionalized "when the Cold War heats up," quote-unquote. The idea of the design was in a European-type geography, where there would be big rolling hills and 800 to 1200 yards between cover. Each soldier would be entrenched and pick off soldiers coming over the hill. Unfortunately, unlike the battles of World War I, we weren't fighting in entrenched positions anymore, and the thought of 800-yard shots were almost impossible to fathom. Now, my personal impressions of the rifle is it is very heavy. Roughly, I think it's 9 pounds unloaded, about 12 fully loaded. It's a burden to run around with, but as a CMP rifle, just for target shooting, it's what you want. It's accurate enough and heavy enough to keep shooting onto the black. The sights are some of the best I've ever seen. I much prefer the aperture sights that the H&K G3 use. I personally shoot them better, but these are extremely fine sights. Now, the National Match sight has a very small aperture to it. To be honest with you, as a combat rifle, this is less than ideal because you won't be able to really see much of what you're shooting at. The trigger is a 2-stage trigger, which I personally love. Some hate it, some are very much a AR-15 type of crowd where they prefer their single-stage triggers. I like 2-stage triggers in all my combat rifles. I like the ability to hold on the first stage, and then I know exactly when that second stage is going to let off. The operating system is a gas piston system. It's a little bit different than the M1 Garand, considering they cut a good, it almost seems like a foot off the operating rod, and then they use a small gas tappet system in the front. Ease of maintenance, it's easy to clean just because of how open everything is. Honestly, it gets just as dirty as an FAL. Definitely not as dirty as a G3 type rifle, but each one of them has their benefits and negatives as well. Expected accuracy out of this rifle, the best I've done is an 1.5-inch group with gold medal match, but that's really pushing it. On average, you're expecting around a 2-inch group. With mil surplus for this rifle, Portuguese specifically, I'm around 3 inches or so, which still is plenty for out to 600 yards, but some guys like more accuracy than that. Price point is the only real heavy hitter on this weapon system. You can get a very, very nice FAL or G3 clone for the $1,000 to $1,500 mark. This rifle with tax was about $2,000. Was it worth it? Absolutely, because it's just one of those few rifles that feels good in your hands while you're shooting it. But at the same time, for me personally, I shoot pistol grips a lot more accurately than I do your traditional wooden stock rifles. So I, by nature, would probably choose an FAL or a G3 over this rifle just purely because of that. I also think that the Garand style safety is an accident just waiting to happen, because you have to actually put your damn finger in the trigger guard to get it to disengage. And don't try to sell me that you can't get it out some other way, because there really is no other way to push it out besides putting your finger inside the trigger. And typically a lot of GIs, what they would do is they'd put their finger in here, push out, and then go back to the trigger. The only other downside to this weapon system, if you want to continue to have accurate fire, is the fact that you can't disassemble this rifle every single time you go to the range. The best way, prescribed by me and quite a few others, is to take the magazine out, pull the bolt to the rear, get some sort of bore snake, or I prefer the Otis cleaning system. Go chamber first through the barrel to clean it. A lot of guys prefer to shut off this gas tappet. This is actually a selector for the grenade launcher, but it also cuts off the gas system and allows the solvent to just lay here instead of going into the gas system. A lot of guys believe that it will slowly seep in and start gunking up your gun, or you can just simply clean it upside down. Then take a small cotton or flannel patch, clean the bolt face, then reapply any grease on the rifle. This is one of the few rifles that require grease instead of oil, and personally I've had no problems as long as I was using Tetra gun grease. Oil tends to fly off this rifle very, very quickly. The only other thing you want to do is every 500 rounds or so, take the gas system apart and clean it. And once a year, you can go ahead and break down the rifle entirely and oil it. I wouldn't authorize anything else on that on the wooden rifles, because if you notice here, this little goofy hole, that's a key that has a metal support inside the rifle stock to help support it when it comes to firing. These rifles have been known to crack if they don't have that type of support in a wooden stock. Obviously polymer ones, you don't have to worry about them wearing in too much or humidity changes, and that's why a lot of the USGI rifles were polymer with that wonderful puke brown color. And the other issue is the fact that since this trigger group clamps down onto the stock via the receiver, it compresses this wood every single time you clamp down. So the point of impact changes every time you break this rifle apart. Typical military fashion would be, once you assemble it, you give 5 to 10 what they call cider rounds, but really what it was is the ability to allow the rifle to settle in each time it's fired. And you will get a drastic point of impact change. I know mine, last time I took it to the range, was about 3 inches high and to the left 2 inches. So once it settled in, it shot right back to point of impact that I originally had dialed in for this rifle. Now the only other problem with this rifle is the fact that the rear sight, since it's a NATO designed rifle, it's in meters, not yards. The old Garands were in yards. Other than that, I think it's a wonderful rifle. If you have the chance to have the money for it, I would pick one up. But if you only have $1,000 laying around, I would much advise that you get something that's a little bit cheaper and cost effective, like an FAL. DSA, for example, makes one, a very good one, for $1,000 right now. I have a 16-inch para that's done wonders for me.